Nickelodeon All-Star Brawl.
Nickelodeon All-Star Brawl has landed, a platform fighter in the same vein as Super Smash Bros. Is it original enough to stand on its own, and should you play Nickelodeon All-Star Brawl?
Oh boy!
Well, I got to admit that out of the 3 Smash Bros. Clones I've played this past week on the channel, this has been my favourite one. Its rich cast of 20 characters, with more promise down the line, adds some fantastic variety to this game that the other 2 couldn't. You've got characters from SpongeBob SquarePants, Avatar, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, and many more. If you grew up on Nickelodeon, then this roster will have many of your favourites, and what's even more charming is the inclusion of even side characters like Nigel Thornberry, April O'Neil and Reptar. Each of the characters have been really well designed, with the developers Fair Play Labs capturing their personalities in their animations and movesets. Each character has a great list of moves to execute. The combat isn't as in-depth as Nintendo's Brawler, as there's a clear lack of many combos in characters' movesets. Instead, you'll find players love to spam the same handful of powerful attacks, which some of the roster have lots of, so it's clear to find some balance issues between the cast, but ultimately, if you're looking at this from a more casual experience, each character is fairly shallow, but it's a big puddle, if that analogy makes any sense. But at the end of the day, it's fun because the gameplay is so responsive and snappy, and I didn't have the same hit detection issues as I did in Showdown of Legendary Legends. Could it be deeper? Definitely, but you'll still get a few hours of enjoyment out of this, especially playing with friends. In terms of modes, Nickelodeon All-Star Brawl just about passes with your standard up to 4-player versus mode that can be played online, a typical arcade mode, and a pretty fun sports mode in which you have a ball in the centre of the map that you have to try and hit into your opponent's goal. And there's various types of balls, ones that are heavier, ones that can only be picked up, or ones that can only be hit. It's not a show stealer or a reason to rush out and play this game, but with a friend over, it's another mode that can be quite fun, but it does feel pretty tacked on to add some replay value, as it doesn't really work with all the maps included, and could have benefited from having its own sports exclusive stages. You've got 20 stages in the game, and they range from pretty fun and really nicely detailed and varied to some of the most disastrously poor maps I've ever played in a platform fighter. You've got stages like the Flying Dutchman ship that are well designed and have great nods to locations from the shows that they're based off. Maps like Western Air Temple and Rooftop Rumble capture their respective cartoons perfectly. The Loud House and Traffic Jam are some of my favourites for how they use the stages as more than just a simple base with 2 platforms above. The Loud House, for example, has many different levels to it, whereas the Traffic Jam has you staying on top of a bus trying not to get caught under the traffic below. But then they really drop the ball on some of these other stages like Glove World, just being so difficult to kind of see what's going on at times, especially when you've got 4 players on screen. There's just so many different colours going on and so many platforms moving at once, it needed more bolder outlines to distinguish the front platforms that you can actually land on from the background. Powdered Toast Trouble that has way too many hazards in this flat level design, like you can get eliminated by being knocked into the bowl of cereal that takes up quite a big portion of the level, or fall off the plate and into the sink below, which doesn't even look like a hazard, and getting eliminated these ways are 90% of the time out of your control. But the worst offender has to be Space Madness. What were they thinking with this level? It's essentially instant death below. There's no bottom to this stage. Instead, you've got to stay on top of these constantly moving bits of furniture flying across the screen. The problem is it's next to impossible to fight accurately on a stage like this because you're always trying to stay on a small platform before it glides off the screen. Whether you win or lose, it's mostly down to just pure luck. And to even show you how unfinished and thrown together that the sports mode is, yeah, it's unplayable on this stage. Unplayable.
I don't want to alarm you, dearest.
But there's no story, cutscenes, final boss, or even character endings in the arcade mode, so what makes it any different to playing versus mode? In terms of unlockables and extra features, this is where Nickelodeon All-Star Brawl severely lacks. You can listen to the game's soundtrack and you can view some concept artwork, and that's about it. And while I love concept galleries in video games, this one was thrown together in what feels like a day. Most of the images are really poor quality, like you just downloaded them off some dodgy site. And seeing this inconsistent artwork is the only reward that you gain from playing through the arcade mode. There's no endings for any of the characters, no unlockable costumes, no mini-games, not even character biographies to see the history of these beloved Nickelodeon franchises. For a near AAA priced game at £45, this is a really lacking video game content-wise. I wish I had more to say about Nickelodeon All-Star Brawl, as I was really looking forward to this game. It truly felt like a game that could finally stand side by side to Smash Brothers, but it just doesn't quite hit the mark. Presentation wise, Nickelodeon is a glamorous game that captures its source material incredibly well. While it may lack in voice acting, ending up with some pretty silent battles, it makes up for this in its charming animation, character models, and lively soundtrack. However, the rest of this package is severely lacking. This game just needed a little deeper combat to complement playing it for longer periods of time. If not, then it needed more modes to play with these characters. What's here is pretty bare bones stuff, versus and arcade, the modes you'd expect from an arcade fighting game in the 90s. But even those 90s fighters at least had endings for each of their characters. Here we don't even really get that. The additional sports mode is novelty at best. Half of the maps were not really designed for that mode, and nor were the characters' movesets designed for kicking balls into goals, so it's clear straight away how much of an afterthought sports mode was. Stages range from some really creative and beautifully captured levels to levels that make you want to vomit all over your controller. Extras? Those 8K resolution concept artwork, that's about it. Should you play Nickelodeon All-Star Brawl? It's gonna be a maybe. It's got a fun cast, a solid soundtrack, and rather shallow but responsive and enjoyable gameplay. But I personally don't recommend this at its current price. I'd say save your money and wait for a sale. With extras like this, and modes like this, £45 is not what this game is worth. Is this the next platform for Smash Brothers lovers? Potentially not. Stick with Ultimate for now until this game sees some of those promised updates. Enjoy playing Sora when he releases later this month, who looks like he has more depth in his moveset than every character on this roster combined. Save your cash and wait for this game to go on a good sale, and then it may just be worth it.
Mr. President, what seems to be the trouble?
I'm caught in my own zipper!